I paused in the hallway, one hand gripping the doorframe while the other hung awkwardly at my side. He lingered in the living room, shifting uneasily, fiddling with his shirt collar as though it were a noose constricting around his neck. "Would you be so kind as to assist me with this, if you don't mind?" Adam asked, throwing a sideways look in my direction. His voice tinged with a recognizable mix of frustration and timidity that I had come to recognize. A fleeting moment of doubt lingered in the air. The request's uniqueness is not the cause. He had earlier requested my help with a range of issues. A button that slipped through his fingers. A recipe yearning for direction. And the profound insights of existence when he encountered a moment of pause. However, this experience was truly unparalleled. I stepped into the room, closing the gap between us as he turned to lock eyes with me. His shirt was pristine, a gentle blue that highlighted the inviting glow of his hazel eyes. He presented himself as rather striking. It was nearly too beautiful, and I scolded myself for recognizing it. "Hold still," I murmured, my fingers delicately working to smooth the unruly fabric of his collar as my fingers danced across the warm skin at the nape of his neck. A wave of sensation enveloped me, a faint quiver, almost undetectable yet undeniably present. Akin to the first whispers of thunder announcing the arrival of a storm, he stood still, his hands dropping to his sides, and the air around us seemed to pulse with a silent intensity. "There." I spoke quickly, taking a step back and letting my fingers trace the smooth fabric of my dress. "All is prepared." "Thank you," he murmured, his tone soft, his eyes holding mine for a moment longer than required. I turned my eyes away before he could notice the warmth rising to my cheeks, but the damage had already been done. My heart raced, and for the first time in years, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, unable to discern whether it was nerves, guilt, or something entirely different. The path I have traveled has not consistently brought me to this moment. Once, I overflowed with confidence, radiated vibrancy, and possessed a steadfast conviction in my role in the world. I embodied the essence of a woman who curated dinner gatherings with finesse, who laughed with ease, and who understood her desires along with the paths to achieve them. That woman now appeared to be a complete mystery. 48. I discovered that I was residing in a tranquil home that seemed overwhelmingly spacious for my solitary existence. My husband Bill had been absent for 3 years, creating a tangled tapestry of memories, some joyful, others sorrowful, and a stepfamily that I was still learning to release from my heart. Adam played a crucial role in that. He entered my domain as a youthful boy. His eyes sparkled with curiosity, yet there was a hint of caution directed towards me. I aimed to provide him with a sense of support, creating a semblance of stability in the wake of his parents' divorce. Throughout this time, I remained aware of the importance of maintaining clarity and boundaries in my role as his stepmother. He had a mother, indeed, and I frequently found myself wishing to tread lightly through her feelings. Yet, the circumstances had shifted. Adam had surpassed the limitations of his younger years. At 26, he stood tall with a sturdy build, exuding a quiet confidence that was simply undeniable. He had matured into a figure his father would have admired, and a man who naturally captured my attention. My mind wandered to Bill, to the life we created side by side, the vows we exchanged, and the countless years I dedicated to honoring his memory. Amidst the looming shadow of loneliness that threatened to engulf me, I found myself standing on the brink of an extraordinary experience, a sensation that ignited a spark of vitality within. One that had lingered in slumber for far too long, yet intertwined with this exhilaration was a nagging guilt that clung to me, defiantly refusing to be cast aside. The door creaked open, its sound fading into the background until Adam's voice pierced the silence. "Good morning to you." His voice caught me off guard, and I glanced up to see him framed in the doorway, a tentative smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It appeared as though slumber had eluded his grasp. Yet, within his eyes lay a subtle power, a calming presence that echoed profoundly within me. "You're here quite early," I noted, my voice soft and inviting. I found it impossible to stay away. He stepped into the room, revealing his secret. He eased himself into the chair across from me, his eyes searching my own. For a fleeting instant, we remained in quietude, the heaviness of it tangible yet somehow comforting. Finally, he leaned in, resting his elbows on the table. He spoke gently, "I can see you're reading too much into this. Your expression reveals everything." A tremulous chuckle slipped from my lips while my fingers gripped the coffee mug tightly. How could I possibly refrain? This is not quite typical. Indeed, he concurred. Yet, it exists, and it belongs to us if we choose to embrace it. His words struck me with the force of a lightning bolt, slicing through the tempest of uncertainty and fear that raged within my thoughts. I gazed at him, truly gazed at him, and perceived not merely the boy I had seen grow, but the man he had evolved into. "Adam," I confessed, my voice quivering, "I am at a loss for words. A plethora of ideas swirls within, yet they simply cannot grasp it." He expressed his uncertainty, saying, "I'm not entirely sure I grasp it." As he extended his hand across the table, his touch enveloped me in warmth, anchoring me in the moment. I sensed the tension in my shoulders begin to dissipate, even if just a little. "We don't have to settle everything right now," he said, "but I understand my feelings. I understand that I do not want to let this go." "Or perhaps you? Do you really?" The inquiry lingered, thick with significance. I contemplated the myriad reasons that urged me to consent, juxtaposed with the powerful instincts driving me to withdraw and create as much distance between us as I could. Yet, I found myself reflecting on the emotions he stirred within me, the comforting embrace surrounding me, a connection starting to blossom, and a wave of hope rising up, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. "Negative," I finally responded, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "I hesitate to leave." A wave of relief swept across his features as he gently squeezed my hand. "Then we proceed slowly," he said, without any pressure or expectations, just the two of us. The clarity of his words calmed the storm inside me, and for the first time since that night, I sensed the burden ease, granting me the ability to breathe again. As the day progressed, we settled onto the porch, watching the world reveal itself around us. The sun loomed grandly in the blue sky, as a gentle, warm breeze swept over the scenery. He settled into his chair, his arm casually resting over the back of mine, and I yielded to the serenity of the moment. Uncertainty hung in the air, prompting me to reflect on the journey we would embark upon through the challenges that lay ahead. As I remained in his presence, feeling the steadfastness of his aura, a singular truth became clear to me. I was no longer alone. That night, as I lay back in bed, I pondered the life I had previously experienced and the fresh path that was beginning to unfold before me. It deviated significantly from my initial vision, and undoubtedly caught everyone off guard. Yet it was mine, chaotic, complex, and overflowing with possibilities. After what seemed like an eternity, I finally felt a readiness to welcome it, and that awareness sent a chill of apprehension coursing through me. Once he adjusted his collar, Adam set off for the evening, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne and a whirlwind of emotions that I found difficult to pinpoint. I set out to manage my evening in the usual way, washing the dishes and tidying up the living room. Still, my thoughts kept drifting back to that instant, the heat of his skin against my touch, the way his eyes held mine in a lingering gaze, the dangerous flutter of my heart as it momentarily stilled. I comforted myself with the thought that it was merely a fleeting moment of unease, a trick of the mind brought on by isolation and too much contemplation of the past. Yet, beneath the surface, I recognized the complexity of the situation, for in that moment, when he directed his gaze toward me, genuinely concentrating on me, it was not the expression of a boy seeking guidance. It was the gaze of a man who genuinely acknowledged my existence. In the following week, Adam came back, this time to help me fix the garden gate. For months, it had been wilting, and I had nonchalantly mentioned it during his most recent visit. I was taken aback by his decision to take the initiative and fix it. Indeed, that was Adam, thoughtful and dependable in a way that made it hard not to feel a true sense of concern. Watching him toil, sleeves pushed up and hair glistening in the sunlight, a sense of unease started to creep in. It had surpassed the confines of his individual being. My experience took center stage. I was entranced by the manner in which I watched him, feeling my heart quicken whenever he was near. Being around him awakened a sense of energy within me that had long been dormant. That night, as I lay back in bed, staring at the ceiling, I suddenly understood that something had shifted. Uncertainty enveloped me, prompting deep reflections on the ultimate destination of this journey. Whether it truly had a destination remains uncertain. However, I found myself unable to deny the reality any longer. A narrative was beginning to take shape. The following days drifted by in a blur of sameness. Nevertheless, an unmistakable feeling remained, hinting that something had shifted, transforming the relationship between Adam and me. It was an experience that defied the limits of language. It was subtle and understated. Still, it remained in the smallest instances, in the quiet corners where we had previously flourished so effortlessly as stepmother and stepson. In that moment, an elusive presence hung in the air, a quiet reality that demanded attention. A simple gesture ignited a chain of events. He showed up to help me tackle the long overdue task of clearing out the garage, a chore I had been putting off for years. Stacks of boxes loomed high, overflowing with a curious assortment of holiday ornaments and the long-neglected tools of Bill. The room was filled with chaos, a wave of disarray washing over me every time I stepped inside. In an instant, Adam reached out with his offer of help. Does a relaxed demeanor provide solace in challenging times? Throughout most of the morning, we labored in quietude, with only the occasional comment about a nostalgic photograph or a beloved memento breaking the tranquility. In an unexpected moment, I came across a box brimming with Bill's belongings, his well-used fishing gear, a set of time-worn baseball caps, and a leather wallet that had undoubtedly endured the passage of time. My hand shook as I lifted it, a flood of memories rushing back, engulfing me in an unforeseen wave. Adam appeared to notice the change in my demeanor, halting his actions to come and stand beside me. "Shall we take a brief pause?" he asked gently, his voice steady and composed. I shook my head, forcing a smile to my lips. "No, I am quite well, just caught off guard." "Nothing else?" He nodded, but stayed where he was. Instead, he remained close, his presence grounding me in an unexpected way. As I set the box down and turned to face him, he reached out, his hand brushing my shoulder in a calming gesture. Yet it sparked a wave of warmth inside me. "Please let me know if this seems too much to handle." He spoke, his gaze lingering on mine for a moment longer than needed before shifting his attention back to the task at hand. It was barely noteworthy, just a fleeting touch and a soft whisper. Yet it remained with me long after he had left that day. Every moment kept building upon itself. A few days later, he returned unexpectedly, stating his intention to examine the gutter that had been leaking during the recent rainstorm. From the perspective of the kitchen window, I watched him climb the ladder, every motion deliberate and purposeful. His shirt clung to his back in the oppressive midday heat, and I found myself staring longer than was proper, my thoughts drifting into territories I was reluctant to face. As he crossed the threshold, a glimmer of sweat beading on his forehead, I offered him a glass of cool lemonade. He accepted with a smile, his fingers brushing against mine as he took the glass. The familiar jolt returned, urging me to look away, as I busied myself with the counter's neatness, even though it was already pristine. "Thanks for the drink," he said, his voice cutting through my daydream. I said it was the least I could do, trying to keep my composure relaxed. "Your help in this matter is genuinely priceless." He offered a relaxed shrug, leaning against the counter with an effortless sense of ease. "There's no requirement for thanks. I truly relish my time spent here." The words were simple, but the way he spoke them made my heart race in a way I hadn't anticipated. As the evening progressed, I settled onto the porch, a book in hand that struggled to engage my interest. Instead, my thoughts wandered back to that moment, cycling through it repeatedly in my mind. The way he looked at me, the soft quality of his voice, was it merely a figment of my imagination, or was there something more profound unfolding beneath the surface? During his next visit, I made up my mind to put my theory into action. Despite my uncertainty regarding my true desires, he suggested trimming the hedges in the garden, a task that seemed unnecessary, yet I opted not to challenge his proposal. I ventured outdoors, pretending to admire the blossoms while inwardly searching for an excuse to stay near him. He paused briefly in his work to present me with a wayward branch that had fallen onto the path. His hand lingered on mine for a brief instant, his thumb brushing against my knuckles in a way that felt imbued with significance. I remained motionless, my breath caught in my throat, while he continued to hold his silence. He gave a faint, understanding smile that stirred a sensation in my stomach before he resumed his work. It was a brief instance, so delicate it could have easily been dismissed as unimportant. Yet it left me in a tumultuous state. Every interaction, every touch, every glance, felt charged with a meaning I was not ready to confront. That night, as I lay in bed, my eyes locked on the ceiling, I sought to untangle the intricacies of it all. I comforted myself with the thought that I was simply fabricating illusions, that I was reading too much into his gestures of kindness and the natural flow of our interactions. However, deep down, I recognized the truth. A silent bond hung in the air, an energy that neither of us was willing to articulate. And regardless of my acceptance, it grew stronger with every passing moment. The next morning, I rose with a feeling of restlessness, an unsettling sensation akin to a dream that danced just beyond my grasp. Nevertheless, it succeeded in making an impression. I busied myself with mundane tasks, dusting surfaces, rearranging the spice rack, anything to keep my mind from wandering back to Adam. Yet, it proved to be in vain. He had an extraordinary knack for penetrating my thoughts. Uninvited yet persistent, later that afternoon, he materialized at my door, as if summoned by my very thoughts. He held a bag of tools tightly and offered me one of his disarming smiles, the kind that always managed to soften my defenses, even if just a little. The back gate, he noted, raising the bag, appeared to require some attention in terms of repairs. I hesitated, a wave of guilt washing over me as I acknowledged his unwavering readiness to help. Still, I permitted him to come in, persuading myself that refusing his kindness would seem ungrateful. The afternoon stretched languidly in the backyard, where I pretended to be absorbed in the task of weeding the flower beds. As he immersed himself in the task of mending the gate, the rhythmic sound of his hammer resonated through the air, creating an oddly soothing tune that compelled me to look his way more often than might be considered suitable. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that flexed with strength at every movement. I tried to focus on my task, but my hands stayed still, the weeds left unattended as my thoughts drifted away. In a fleeting instant, he cast a glance my way and discovered me ensnared in contemplation, my eyes locked onto him. "What ideas fill your thoughts?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes were filled with curiosity. Delving deeper, I found emptiness, having misled, as I cleaned the dirt from my gloves and stood up. "I've been contemplating the peculiar quiet that has settled over this place lately." "Is there an absence of sound?" he asked, his tone light, but the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. In that moment, I found myself conceding, my tone softer and more considerate. He stayed quiet, but the warmth of his smile lingered in the atmosphere as he shifted his attention to his work. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, I settled onto the porch with a glass of wine, contemplating the day's events that had just transpired. His gaze held an unmistakable quality, and the way his words flowed felt profoundly unique. It surpassed simple acts of kindness or expressions of affection. It was a deep bond, a thoughtful manifestation of something much more meaningful. Upon his next arrival, it was for the evening meal. Earlier in the day, he had placed a call, extending an invitation to bring steaks for grilling. I yielded, not solely due to the absence of a compelling reason to refuse, but also because a part of me hesitated to push back. The evening unfolded in the kitchen, where we chopped vegetables and exchanged words that flowed seamlessly between the meaningful and the mundane. He shared a recent project at work, describing the obstacles he faced and the strategies he employed to navigate them successfully. I found myself laughing at his wit, giving him a gentle nudge whenever he got a bit too serious. As the evening progressed, the gap between us seemed to lessen. While I was setting the table, a fork slipped from my fingers, and just as I bent down to pick it up, he quickly intervened. As he placed it in my palm, our fingers brushed softly, and I raised my gaze, finding his eyes locked onto mine with unwavering intensity. The moment stretched on, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Thank you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. You're welcome, he replied. Still, he hesitated for just a moment more. His hand lingered near mine for a brief instant. He pivoted and retraced his steps to the stove. After dinner, we moved to the living room, the almost empty bottle of wine sitting between us. The conversation grew richer, adopting a more personal tone, as was typical when the wine started to flow generously. He noted that he might not have ever conveyed his appreciation. His tone now filled with seriousness. What is the aim? I asked, genuinely bewildered. In reply to everyone, he remarked on their intrusion into his life when it was unwarranted. For being there during the moments when Dad was somewhat absent. I swallowed hard, his words catching me off guard. There's no requirement to show appreciation for that. Adam, I responded in a manner that any sensible individual would have in that circumstance. Not just anyone, he responded, shaking his head in disbelief. You were distinct. Your presence always made it clear that I mattered. His words hit me with an unexpected intensity. I turned my eyes away, focusing intently on the dancing flame of the candle perched on the coffee table. Still, I could feel his gaze locked onto me. I don't think I've ever told you this, he continued, his voice softening to a gentle whisper. However, after Dad passed away, my presence wasn't just about providing assistance to you. I came here because the idea of losing you was unbearable. His confession cut deep, sending my heart into a whirlwind of emotions. A mixture of tenderness and regret swirled inside me as I instinctively reached out, placing my hand softly over his. I will always be by your side, I asserted, my tone steady despite the emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. He turned his hand, his fingers weaving together with mine. The warmth of the touch enveloped me, both grounding and electrifying, igniting a spark within that beckoned for my focus. In that ephemeral instant, we remained in quietude, our fingers interwoven. Outside, the world started to fade away, leaving just the two of us wrapped in that tranquil, intimate bubble. I should have pulled away, should have spoken a word that might break the spell. Still, I chose to hold my tongue. I found myself unable to. When I finally raised my eyes, I discovered his gaze steadfast and resolute. You matter to me, he said, his words clear but heavy with meaning. A lump settled in my throat, but I pushed it down, conjuring a delicate smile. Your importance to me is just as deep. The moment lingered, heavy with an unarticulated tension that I found myself reluctant to name. Finally, he let go of my hand, and in that moment, the spell broke, leaving me with a blend of relief and an unquenchable longing for what had just vanished. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind was entirely occupied with thoughts of him. His words, his touch, the way he looked at me, I felt the weight of the dangerous journey I was embarking on. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, I felt a spark of something I thought had long disappeared, the possibility of connection, of something more profound. Though the destination remained shrouded in uncertainty, I could no longer turn a blind eye to the undeniable truth that awaited me. The connection developing between us was unmistakably authentic, growing stronger with every fleeting second. The rain continued its unyielding assault, drenching the landscape in a muted spectrum of gray, muffling all sound save for the steady drumming on the roof overhead. I stood by the window, watching the streams of water flow down the glass. The backyard revealed itself as a blur of lively green, the garden cloaked in a gentle haze. Adam was supposed to visit in the afternoon, but I was left in silence. A part of me secretly hoped that the weather had changed his plans. There was another facet, the one I tried to ignore, that quietly longed for his arrival all the same. As the clock neared 6 and the sky began to transition into twilight, the unmistakable rumble of his truck resonated as it made its way into the driveway. My heart raced, though the cause remained a mystery, as I flung the door open. He stood on the porch, drenched to the bone, his hair plastered to his forehead, as rainwater streamed down his face, trickling into the collar of his jacket. He held a large paper bag in one hand, giving me a shy smile. With a casual grin, he lifted the bag and declared, "Thought I'd bring dinner." "You're soaked," I remarked, stepping aside to let him in. He admitted, a trace of surrender in his tone as he removed his jacket and placed it on the hook by the door. His shirt clung to his chest and arms, highlighting his lean, athletic physique. I quickly turned my eyes away, pretending to focus on the thermostat adjustment. "Go dry off," I commanded, my voice crisp and direct. "A towel lies quietly in the bathroom." He slipped away into the corridor, and I released a shaky breath. The tension that had been building between us for weeks now felt nearly unbearable. The rain deepening the closeness of our seclusion inside the home. Upon his return, his hair was slightly damp yet carefully styled back, and he had donned a simple gray t-shirt, probably one he had overlooked during a previous visit. The garment embraced him flawlessly, the fabric stretched just right to highlight his chest. I focused intently on unsealing the takeout containers, resolute in my effort to keep my eyes from straying. "It smells delightful," he remarked, taking his place beside me at the kitchen counter. "It's simply Chinese," I replied, my tone steadier than the turmoil within me. "It transcends anything I could possibly create in the kitchen." He offered a smile, leaning slightly forward as he reached out his hand toward the plates. We enjoyed our meal in the dining room, the soft rhythm of rain intermingling with the lulls in our conversation. At first, the dialogue unfolded smoothly, centered on work, the garden, and seemingly minor topics that felt unimportant. As the meal unfolded and the wine began to weave its magic, the atmosphere shifted subtly. He asked about Bill, about the condition of our union. It was a subject he rarely brought up. I unveiled the reality to him, how we had held each other dear, yet how the past few years had become a challenge. His absence left an emptiness in my life, a gap I struggled to fill. "It is my conviction that he would have desired your joy." Adam spoke gently, his eyes locked onto mine. I averted my gaze, the weight of his words pressing down on my heart. "Joy often presents itself in complex ways." "No," he conceded, his tone soft, yet at times, the effort is worthwhile. The words hung in the air, dense and unspoken, as if he had communicated something deeper than he had meant to. My pulse quickened, each heartbeat resonating in my ears, as though he could feel the cadence of my unease. I started to tidy the table, searching for something to occupy my fidgeting hands. He wandered into the kitchen. His closeness was so profound that I could feel the warmth emanating from him. "Let me help you," he said softly, his voice barely rising above a whisper. I extended my hand to present him with a plate, and as our fingers brushed, a brief contact sent a shiver racing down my spine. As I raised my eyes, I discovered his gaze locked onto mine, brimming with warmth and a profound curiosity. "Adam," I began. Yet the words slipped through my fingers. He raised his hand, delicately tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingertips grazing my skin with a tender touch. The gesture, filled with warmth and purpose, took my breath away. "There's no requirement for speech," he murmured gently. Yet, I felt an undeniable urge to express myself, to articulate something, anything, to prevent the looming turmoil. Yet, the words slipped through my fingers. In a fleeting moment, I sensed his hand on my cheek, his thumb softly tracing the contours of my skin. His touch wrapped around me like a comforting embrace, a reliable anchor, and I yielded to it without hesitation, my eyelids fluttering shut as his lips grazed against mine. The moment unfolded with a soft uncertainty, as if he were presenting me with the chance to withdraw. I did not. The kiss deepened, and for a fleeting moment, everything beyond them slipped away into nothingness. In that instant, there was neither rain nor refuge, no traces of what had once been or murmurs of what lay ahead. The mere touch of his lips grazing mine, the warmth of his hands on my waist, and the steady beat of his heart pulling me closer. As we finally parted ways, I discovered I couldn't bring myself to look him in the eye. My heart raced, and my mind was engulfed in a whirlwind of emotions I struggled to understand. "I apologize," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should not have done that." "Please don't," I interjected, my voice trembling. "No apology is necessary." He took a step back, establishing a space between us. Still, his eyes were fixed on me. "I truly meant it," he said softly. In each fleeting moment, I discovered myself utterly speechless. All I grasped was that my reality had shifted yet again. The boundaries I had strived to maintain now blurred into obscurity. He stayed for a moment, helping me organize things before finally stepping out into the rain. I watched him from behind the glass as he approached his truck. His shoulders slumped under the unyielding downpour. As he drove away, I stood still, the lingering warmth of his touch resonating on my skin long after he disappeared from view. I reassured myself that it was simply a mistake, a momentary misstep in reasoning. Yet beneath the surface, I discerned the reality of the situation. A transformation had taken place in our relationship, and withdrawal was no longer a viable choice. The days that came after the kiss drifted by in a blur. I endeavored to lose myself in a multitude of distractions, housework, gardening, and even revisiting a jigsaw puzzle that had long been neglected. However, none of it yielded any results. Visions of Adam danced through my thoughts, the warmth of his hands, the intensity of his gaze, and the electric connection that sparked when our lips met lingering in my memory. It had been some time since I last heard from him, ever since that evening, although his occasional absence for a few days was not unusual. This specific moment bore a significance that was strikingly atypical. The emptiness created by his absence weighed heavily on me, an unforeseen load that grew heavier with each passing day, the silence enveloping me more and more. By the fourth day, I had reached my limit. The sun dipped low in the sky as I resolved to contact him. My fingers hovered just above the screen, suspended in a fleeting moment of doubt. What might I convey? I yearned for his presence. My thoughts were consumed solely by that night. Or should I pretend not to know, pulling us both back into a facade of normalcy that has long since disappeared? Before I had the chance to think it through, I pressed the button. After 2 rings, he at last picked up the phone. "Hi," he said, his voice tinged with hesitation, as if he were unsure of the purpose behind my call. "Greetings," I replied, my heart pounding with excitement. A silence hung in the air, elongated just enough for the heaviness of tension to take root, and I urged myself to shatter the stillness once again. "Could you possibly stop by today? I seek guidance regarding a specific issue." Another instance of quietude. "In that scenario, I will be there in 20 minutes. As I hung up the phone, a sudden rush of regret enveloped me. As I neared him, a haze of uncertainty enveloped my mind, wrestling with the elusive words and the tumult within that threatened to break free. Upon his arrival, I welcomed him at the door, attempting to maintain a casual facade even as my heart raced uncontrollably. He stepped inside, his expression shrouded in enigma, and the familiar scent of his cologne wrapped around me, stirring a profound and unwelcome emotion within. "How may I be of service to you today?" he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes searched mine, causing my lips to part, yet silence surrounded me. In truth, I discovered that I was entirely able to handle everything independently. I felt an undeniable urge to see him, to bridge the growing distance that had emerged between us since that pivotal night. Finally, I exhaled softly and stepped aside, subtly gesturing toward the living room. "Shall we find a place to sit?" He followed quietly, and we settled into our spots at opposite ends of the couch. The distance between us felt immense, even though we were only a few feet away from each other. "The dialogue appears to be proceeding as expected," I began, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. He leaned in, elbows resting on his knees, as he made his remark. "I resonate with that feeling too." In that brief instant, silence wrapped around us like a soft embrace. The weight of his stare bore down on me, and still, I couldn't bring myself to look into his eyes. "I find it difficult to understand the dynamics that are developing between us," I admitted, my fingers restless in my lap, fully conscious that it must not happen again. "The scenario is complex." "Complexity does not mean something cannot be achieved," he commented, his tone steady but tinged with a trace of frustration. I lifted my eyes, meeting his gaze. Within those depths, a spark flickered, maybe it was determination, or a profound yearning that took my breath away. As I began to speak, Adam cut me off. "I can foresee your words. It is misguided, excessively tumultuous, and laden with peril. However, it is undeniable that you experience it too." I looked at him, a tightness building in my throat. He was certainly right. I found it impossible to deny that truth. However, articulating it felt like crossing a boundary I wasn't ready to face. I don't know what I feel, I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He moved closer, closing the gap that separated us. Indeed, he affirmed. I have been conscious of this for a considerable period, and I trust you have been too. His words hung heavily in the air, thick and unrelenting. My heart tightened, ensnared in the chaos of fear over what this could mean and the undeniable truth of his assertions. Before I could respond, he reached out, his hand brushing against mine, a gesture that felt both subtle and significant. Still, it ignited a surge of warmth inside me that I could not ignore. If you truly lack any feelings, then tell me to leave, he said softly. I will turn away and let this moment fade, leaving it unspoken between us from this point forward. Parted my lips, ready to speak, but the words slipped away from me. I found myself captivated by him, my heart pounding as the stillness enveloped us. As the quiet wrapped around us, he moved closer, his hand softly cupping my cheek. Just say the word, he murmured, his gaze searching deeply into mine. I found myself unable to resist. Instead, I yielded to his touch, my eyes fluttering shut as the last remnants of my resolve faded away. His lips grazed mine, and the kiss transcended anything we had felt before. This moment was critical, overflowing with weeks of built-up tension and longing that neither of us could hold back any longer. His hand settled on my waist, pulling me closer as the space between us disappeared. I clung to him, my fingers intertwining with his hair, my breath hitching as his lips brushed gently against my neck. After an extended period, a wave of energy flowed through me again, as we finally parted ways. An intimate breathlessness surrounded us, our foreheads softly meeting. A moment frozen in time, the weight of our recent choices hung in the atmosphere, a tangible tension that bound us together. Surprisingly, I felt no urge to escape this time. I don't want to stop, he said, his voice husky and filled with emotion. In a moment of vulnerability, I discovered that my thoughts had escaped my lips before I could think twice. We meandered through the evening, wrapped in a bond that seemed both audacious and fated. Every touch, every hug, every gentle word echoed as though a piece of a magnificent tapestry was effortlessly coming together. As he left, the rain had stopped, and the outside world was wrapped in a peaceful quietude. As he walked toward his truck, his silhouette sharply defined by the moonlight, a deep understanding took root within me. The path ahead was irrevocable. Regardless of the challenges that awaited us, we would face them together. The morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, creating a warm, golden glow, but it felt oddly out of place against the heaviness that lingered in my chest. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into a half-empty cup of coffee, the steam long gone. The house was enveloped in silence, occasionally broken by the faint creak of the floorboards beneath me, but my mind was anything but calm. Adam had left during the late hours of the night before. Our conversations had diminished considerably after, well, everything that happened, yet it seemed pointless to bridge the silence. The stillness that hung in the air between us was far from empty. It had seemed rich, brimming with emotions we found difficult to express. Under the glaring sun, the weight of our choices pressed upon me, solid and relentless like a boulder.